Welcome to All Things Locks, the show where we discuss everything related to leadership, operations, culture, and strategies for growth. And today we got a real special guest. It's going to be everything LinkedIn. And we got Sheikh Ali, who's the CEO and founder of SE Medical Media. Now, what Sheikh is going to be going over today is going to change the way you look at LinkedIn. Right now, everybody just thinks it's a B2B platform, or it's maybe where I can post for a job. But his goal is to help healthcare leaders and executives get on the platform and, more importantly, use it the right way. Now, Sheikh, his background is all in medicine, and he has a phenomenal journey where he left medical school due to a lot of the challenges we're currently facing. And he saw a different way that you could still serve other people. And for him, that was through LinkedIn. So you're going to be getting some high-level strategies on how to not just use the platform, but use it the right way to help your brand and more specifically to help your business. Let's get going. So welcome to the show. Glad you were able to make it. I know you were dying to get out to Vegas and shoot this in person, but hey, man, eventually we will get there. But I want to really, we'll be talking everything, obviously, LinkedIn for, healthcare executives, leaders, and whatnot. But I want to really start our audience off with a little bit more so of not necessarily your background, but just how you made that move, because it's non-traditional. And we're in a time now where people in medicine are looking for maybe some either non-clinical roles or just things to do differently to either give them some freedom, time, whatever it may be. So I'm really interested, and I think it'll provide a lot of value for our audience that at least understands where you were before you're currently at now, and then how you made that move and what necessitated
Me on the podcast. Really appreciate it. And yes, one day we will do it in person. I'm in Miami though, so it's a bit of a commute. Now, in terms of my origin story, when I was young, I actually wanted to be a private practice surgeon. I know, from a very, very young age. That was always my dream. That was always my goal. Fast forward 20 years through undergrad, through medical school, and then COVID happened between my third and my fourth year of medical school in particular. And so in terms of the pivot and how I was able to make the power of that pivot, I noticed that, first of all, kind of looking at the conditions of where medicine was during COVID, and I know we can all remember that time, but what I noticed was that a lot of private equity and big hospitals were buying out the private practices. And so for me, I knew that if I were to come up as a young and upcoming physician, it would be very difficult to start my own private practice or even to join a private practice because they were getting all bought out. And so when that landscape happened and then COVID happened as well, and even as medical students, we couldn't even rotate on certain rotations at certain times because of the lockdowns and everything that was going on. I said, okay, time to take a self-reflection, look at my skill sets and see what other opportunities there are out there. But at the same time, I didn't want to necessarily leave the field of healthcare entirely because I felt like I had built up all of this knowledge base and knowing the difference between all the specialties and working amongst those specialties as a medical student. And so entrepreneurship was always going to be in the cards regardless. And so basically at that point, I'm like, okay, let me kind of look around and see what options there are. I looked at starting a YouTube channel. I looked at podcasts, which you guys are doing a great job with, by the way. But at the same time, I figured, I'm like, you know what, let me just do social media because a lot of businesses were transitioning to virtual. And they needed marketing. They needed social media marketing to help them market their businesses. And so for me, I decided, okay, what if I could take this concept of social media marketing and combine it with healthcare? And that's kind of how my company, SC Medical Media, was born. And then when I started the business, which was January of 2023, I was doing Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn in particular. So I was doing all three platforms. And then January of 2024, a year later, so by the time this recording comes out, almost 2 years now, I've been doing LinkedIn only. And I love LinkedIn because LinkedIn is strictly business to business. I like the nature of it. I think that the platform members tend to be a little older and a little wealthier. And so I thought that, hey, there's a good business opportunity here, especially because what I do is more business to business as opposed to patient acquisition, which is something that we can talk about.
Okay, well, there's a lot to unpack there. But phenomenal story, though. I mean, would I be, very curious? You mentioned somewhere in there, regardless, I was going to be an entrepreneur. So, you could have made the shift from, medicine, and you could have got a W-2 job, right? But you kind of make it seem like that really wasn't an option for you. And I'm just curious to know what maybe was driving that mentality
Yeah.
regarding to you were practicing?
It was really about reflection and just being honest with myself and knowing that where I personally thrive the most, whether it was in my past experiences or as a medical student, is where I could be in a leadership role. And I knew that going into a W-2, I would not be in a leadership role immediately, as opposed to, as you gentlemen know, starting your own business where you kind of have to be the point person for everything. So really being honest about myself and what my skill sets are and what environment could I create that is conducive to thriving in those skill sets.
What, when you're looking at that, I find that's very insightful, and you're basically looking at what you want to be, who you want to be, what kind of skill sets you definitely have. Like, you can see it's fairly obvious talking to you really quick that you have a strong leadership persona. How do you think in the medical realm where people have maybe that similar mindset, but they're either gun shy to go out and start their own practice, or for you, you're like, screw that. That's not the right move based on what the pattern is in medicine. How do you think that kind of comes into play of people wanting to start their own practice versus maybe going into the ranks of being an entry level doctor or a chiropractor or
I think it comes down to mindset. And there are really three parts to mindset that I actually, if it's cool if I discuss them. So, first of all, it's more just having a goal oriented mindset. So, starting with the end in mind, that's number one. But also understanding that even though you might have that goal in place, the avenue to get there, the path to get there might change. And the timing of that might change. Because I feel like all of us people who are entrepreneur minded, we always have these timelines, like we're going to do this in a year, we're going to do this in 2 years. And sometimes the timeline ends up being longer than you anticipate. So really just being honest with yourself that the goal is there, but the roadmap might look different by the time you actually reach that goal. That's number one. Number two, the other thing is just having a growth mindset. And again, it kind of goes back to being honest with myself and understanding that even though it's going to be hard in the beginning, the dream has to be bigger than the fear. So the fear of, oh my God, I don't know if I can do this by myself. For me, the dream was just so big. I knew that I saw that LinkedIn had a space and there was an opportunity there for me to make an impact on clinician and healthcare executives. So the dream was so big that it kind of superseded the fear. And then the other thing too, in addition to that, is having an abundance mindset. So understanding that I was not going to be able to do this alone. And even right now, even though I run the business as a solopreneur, I have tons of collaborators, you being one of them, Dan, because remember, I introduced you to another Daniel who's also an operator, and you guys had a great conversation there too. So really those three things combined in that mindset, just that I'm not afraid, I'm just going to do it, and I'm going to make it happen. Yeah.
put him on the spot. Remember, I referred that person.
Mm.
If I was running a practice and I wanted to, and I want to circle back to this, if I wanted to sell my practice to private equity, what would you tell me? Or because there's people obviously out there who that's the decision they're facing, right? Do I sell it to them? They're giving me a phenomenal offer.
So for
What
me,
would the recommendation that
on
you would give?
multiple factors. First of all, do they actually have a personal brand? Because if they have a personal brand that they have already built on LinkedIn, then I actually think that it makes that transition to selling to the PE company much easier, because the patients or the collaborators that they have would follow them because of who they are as a person. That's number one. Number two, in terms of making that decision, that's really, again, something that the clinician is really going to just have to be honest with themselves about. Because if the PE company is not really going to give them the opportunity to thrive as a clinician, then I think the writing's on the wall there.
If you have a doctor that maybe they built out a lot of their following or their authority on other platforms, let's just say YouTube or Instagram, just other platforms, and they have a pretty non-existent presence on LinkedIn, does that sway your strategy?
Because I only do LinkedIn only, but I do have collaborators who are in the Instagram and those other spaces that I refer to. So again, that's where I was talking about at the beginning, where having a core group of people or building a robust network is so important. Yeah.
So if someone is kind of going back and forth about uh, releasing their business to private equity and there is not a LinkedIn, do you believe like that can hurt their chances or maybe their negotiations
Because a lot of the
between private
decision
equity?
makers are on LinkedIn. And so, and even though they may not necessarily be liking or commenting on your posts, they are lurking out there. And so, for example, just to give an arbitrary example, yesterday I had a call with a healthcare executive, a big time healthcare executive, and he has been growing on LinkedIn quite rapidly. And he said he had PE firms reach out to him as inbound. And so, building that presence is going to be essential to attracting those business opportunities. Because if you have a PE offer that you don't like, and you have a robust network of other people in PE, you can have a counter offer. You know what I mean? And maybe the counter offer from the other PE person might allow that clinician to thrive in that environment, like what we were talking about before.
So it's setting yourself up to create a bidding war. Yeah, cool. Awesome. So, one of the questions that I had too, kind of sticking onto that point of, you had a doctor that, or just an entrepreneur where they have been building out their authority in these other platforms. And for someone that's watching this, that's like, hey, I've just never really dove into LinkedIn all that much. It does feel like the the demographic is very, very different. It's a little bit professional, and maybe the person is like a little bit more outlandish, or they're a little bit more like
Yeah.
non PC. You know what I mean? So, what kind of what kind of advice would you give that person? And then,
Okay.
what are your predictions
So
for
first of all, if
LinkedIn long
someone's
term?
trying to transition to LinkedIn, I think that it's important to have a strategy in place. Because if you don't have a deliberate target strategy and know who your ideal audience is, then it's going to be very difficult to navigate that landscape. So, first of all, if they are more outlandish on the other platforms, first of all, I would say that the culture of LinkedIn is a little different. So that's something that there might have to be a mindset shift there where it's like, if I want to thrive on LinkedIn, then I'm going to have to use a different skill set or a different strategy compared to what I use on the other platforms. That's number one. Number two, if they want to get started, again, knowing who their target audience is, who are they looking to collaborate with, who are they looking to build those business relationships with, and then using that as the bedrock foundation for dictating what their LinkedIn strategy is going to be. Okay. So that's the first part. The second question, what was the second question? Remind me of it.
I believe the second question was,
Oh, okay.
I actually kind of
What
forgot
it
to.
so what he was at? It's okay. Third person in the room. I gotcha. What Antonio was asking, which I think is a real good question too, is what is the overall? What do you see as the growth or the
LinkedIn predictions.
the next phase for LinkedIn? Especially knowing that it's still compared to other
So I
platforms,
think that
kind of
LinkedIn
on the small
will
size.
continue to grow because LinkedIn is actually owned by Microsoft. So Microsoft bought LinkedIn over 10 years ago, and they are constantly investing and reinvesting in it because it is kind of, if you think about the goal of LinkedIn, because the goal is business to business networking, it is an arm of their enterprise for sure. And there's 1.2 billion with a B users on LinkedIn worldwide and growing. Because when I started LinkedIn, it was only 1 billion, and now it's already 1.2 billion. So I do think that the future is bright for LinkedIn in terms of being able to really build out your presence. Another thing that I wanted to add is only 1 to 3% of LinkedIn users post at least once a week. So that means that there's a whole slew of people out there that are lurking, but they're not necessarily posting. And so that gives on up and coming entrepreneurs or even people who are more established in the clinical world a real opportunity to grow and to thrive on the platform.
Sheikh, if it's possible, by comparison, you said like was a 1% that does it weekly compared to if you look at like Meta, for example, like what would that difference be? Okay.
But there, you mentioned that there's 1.2 billion users, but how many of them are actually active
Yeah.
on the platform? It's like
It's definitely
very small, isn't
a
it?
very small amount because I think that LinkedIn is still an untapped market for sure.
So
It's like 10 million a week.
yeah, right. So if you look at the percentage, it's like nothing compared to say Instagram or TikTok or Facebook, where I mean it's got to be, I don't know the number, but I think if I'm not mistaken, I think it's close to a billion people a day are using it. So if you're just looking at the bandwidth, and 2 point, you take out the say if it's 10 million people, and then you say all right, 1% of total is what's posting, definitely gives you an advantage that other platforms don't have. Now, what about those practices? They're not looking to sell. They're doing their day to day. They're having a good old time. They're getting patients better. What is still the benefit for them? Say maybe that local chiropractor, for them to get on there and start being so aggressive.
Chiropractor wants to build more of a national presence where, again, it's not necessarily about getting patients because they've already got a good flow of patients in, but it's more about building their authority online so that other people can know about them. Also, collaborating with other chiropractors, getting invited to speaking engagements or podcasts. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for LinkedIn. And so because I wouldn't have known Dan Dan the man, if it wasn't for LinkedIn. And so because of that, really building your national authority and becoming a, thought leader is a word that's used. I prefer more like a digital opinion leader rather than thought leader. It's kind of a little bit more of an accurate term. And so really, yeah. And so becoming a digital opinion
I would
leader
agree with him.
space and really building out your national presence, that's where LinkedIn can really give you an opportunity. The other thing too that I want to mention is chiropractors oftentimes might need B2B collaborators. For example, personal injury attorneys. That's a big one that refer people to chiropractors all the time. Orthopedic surgeons, another one that also can refer to chiropractors as well if the condition presents itself that way. And so being able to build a robust network on both a local and a national level is something where LinkedIn can really, really be useful.
Yeah, you said something in there, like all that was very, very good, obviously. But the aspect of even just speaking engagements, right? You talk to any medical provider, more so the ones obviously running an organization, and they're all facing the same challenges, right? Which we know is mostly insurance. I'm getting paid, year after year a lot less. I'm getting more denials. They're all looking for more income. And you mentioned something there. What about a speaking engagement or, being able to get yourself out there, maybe go on a stage and do some talks and get paid for it. So we're looking for those alternative ways to make money. And you just mentioned a great one that can't happen if you just basically sit in an office all day being non-existent.
I had a really quick question, kind of going back to the platforms. So I think maybe a year or two ago, there was definitely a lot of talk around TikTok, and I don't know if this was I don't know if this, because there's kind of conflicting reporting on this, where TikTok in China and the algorithm of TikTok and how that varied from the algorithm of, let's just say, Instagram, and how like people can go a little bit more viral or whatever, right? Like there's some subtle or stark differences between those two algorithms, and content creators or professionals, they would get on one or the other. You said a minute ago that LinkedIn is owned by Microsoft. Are there distinct algorithm differences between those platforms that maybe people can jump on? Because you mentioned that just the sheer volume of people from LinkedIn compared to the others, the percentage of them actually posting on a weekly basis. But talk a little bit about your knowledge on the algorithmic side.
Algorithm for TikTok and Instagram, because, I kind of got out of that a long time ago, a couple of years ago. But when it comes, yeah, for real. But when it comes to
Nobody knows anyway.
So there are many, many different things about the algorithm, but I'll try and keep them as brief as possible. First of all, again, we go back to the strategy. That's why I always talk about it. Knowing who your core target audience is extremely critical. So just to kind of use myself as an example. So for me, for example, my target audience are clinician and healthcare executives who want to build out their presence on LinkedIn. And so making sure that my content really speaks to two things. Number one, their pain points. And number two, the outcomes that are provided by, let's just say, working with me, for example. Painting pictures of those is going to be really important in terms of your content strategy. Now, once you have that strategy dialed in, and there's a lot more to strategy, I can talk for over an hour just about strategy, but I'm trying to keep it brief here. Once you have that strategy dialed in, then it's about the post itself. So the post itself that tends to do the best on LinkedIn are twofold. Number one is static photo and long form caption. And number two is also carousels, but more like the PDF style carousels. Because again, the goal, LinkedIn at its core is more of an education platform as opposed to an entertainment platform like what Instagram and TikTok do. There was a time earlier in 2025 when LinkedIn was going very heavy into video content. There was a period at the beginning of 2025, but I would say that since June of 2025, they've been clawing back on that a little bit now. And again, it's more the written word, because LinkedIn prioritizes more the written word as opposed to necessarily the flashy and the fancy videos. Now, in terms of your posting time, in terms of being strategic about that as well, I always recommend 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time because, again, if you think about the LinkedIn crowd, they're professional. And so they're not going and scrolling after work. They're going like first thing in the office, they're going on LinkedIn and they're seeing what their colleagues and what their network has to say. In terms of the algorithm itself, once you actually post, the first hour of posting is the most important, and we call that the golden window. And essentially, what I always advise, I do it myself, but also I advise my clients, is that you should try and comment on other people's posts about 10 to 15 minutes before you post. And then once you post for that first 30 minutes to an hour, respond to the comments that are on your post as quickly as you can, because that is going to help push out your content to even more people. Now, can I continue or you want to take a pause there? Because it's a lot of information there. Okay, so also, when it comes to that content, also understand that as you post and within that first hour and you're doing the engagement, LinkedIn is still going to push out that post even more. So it's very, very common that 2, 3, 4 days, sometimes a week after the post goes live, you're still getting likes, you're still getting comments, because LinkedIn has a very stepwise process of how it pushes out the posts. During that first hour, it sends it out to a certain amount of people that are in your network first to see how they respond to it. And then depending on the feedback, both on their end and also how quickly you're responding to comments, then it's going to push out the posts even more, push out the posts even more, push out the posts even more. And then in the middle of this year, so June to July of 2025, LinkedIn started resurfacing 2 to 3 week posts. So now the shelf life of your LinkedIn content is much longer than what it used to be. It's very common that you go on your LinkedIn feed and you see a post from 2 weeks ago from one of your connections that's appearing at the top of your feed. And so that's another thing that LinkedIn is starting to incorporate.
I wonder, I wonder how much that is of just that platform needing to recycle content or both, just because no one's really posting. Yeah. Well, one thing I thought was interesting to ask is so Dan and I, we've interviewed a handful of marketing agencies. We worked with marketing agencies, and one of the biggest gripes that kind of they have from time to time, depending on which platforms that they're working with, are the TOU, the terms of use. That the terms of use for Meta is like, constantly changing, or they're making adjustments, or there's a new AI that's kind of being integrated that kind of removes some of the some of the offers that these agencies have. When we're thinking about the terms of use, because you mentioned there was a couple things that were clawed back in June, there was some adjustments that were made. How often is that with LinkedIn, or is it a pretty consistent platform on that front with terms of use?
I personally, because I'm involved in the LinkedIn world and this is what I do for a living, I try and update myself every quarter, really, because sometimes it changes so fast that typically every quarter I'll be looking at what documents are out there by LinkedIn itself, and then there are other people that study it in a lot more detail. But in terms of what it currently is as of this recording, is when it comes to AI, this is from my understanding, anything that is, if it's an AI outreach software, for example, that is directly linked to your LinkedIn account, you run the risk of actually getting banned from the platform and being restricted, because clawing that data is against LinkedIn's terms of use. And so the old school manual approach when it comes to outreach, and by the way, I just want to be fully transparent. This has actually happened to me. So in 2024, there was a software that I was using to do automated outreach that was affixed to my account, and I actually got restricted twice, and I had to submit my license, everything. And at the beginning of this year, I said, you know what, I'm going to stop doing that. I'm just going to do it the old-fashioned way, and I've had no problems ever since. So yeah.
Sticking on to strategy, one of the things that you mentioned was you filled out this form, and there was something that really stuck out to me, which was that when it comes to marketing and life, strategy is everything. I'm just going to read off of it here a little bit. And you said that if you speak to everyone, you speak to no one. And the very first call that you have with someone that you could be potentially working with yourself and your business, is that you want to come up with 1 to 2 superpowers that you push to the forefront to help distinguish themselves with their competitors, basically like these differentiators. I've always find it fascinating when someone says like, your superpower or something like that, because it is rather a subjective word from person to person, right? Can you describe what you mean when you're working with someone like, okay, that's a skill, that's not your superpower, bro. Like this is your shit. This is not, right? So walk us through a little bit of what that process is to extract it, and then what that superpower actually means to you, where you're like, this is gold. Let's put this out on the forefront because it will convert.
Yeah, you're killing
Hey,
it.
hitting all these great questions today, and it's like 4 back-to-back great questions.
Call. The very first.
Thanks, man.
First of all, before I do the intro call, I prepare, just like anybody else. You got to prepare before. So I peruse. Yeah, I mean, I peruse.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, I could really tell.
I don't prepare. I don't know, I just show up. Yeah.
Not everybody does.
So I peruse their profile very carefully first to see what I can extract from it. And a lot of times it's unclear. So that discovery call is as much of a clarity call as it is a discovery call. On that discovery call, the thing that I'm interested the most in soliciting is their story, their actual personal story. Because for me, personal branding at the end of the day is just being a gifted storyteller and being able to tell stories. We've been telling stories since the caveman times and around the campfire. So when it comes to their story, I like to hear what their why is. Why did they pursue medicine? What was it that caused Dan, for example, to become a physical therapist? Was it something that occurred in his personal life, or maybe it was something professionally, or was it something of that nature? So I like to find out their story first. And then after that, there are typically not necessarily skills, but when I say superpower, the idea is that there's something that they're good at that I notice just by hearing them talk, just by listening carefully and hearing them talk. So I'll give you an arbitrary example. So I had a client that I recently worked with. He's an emergency medicine healthcare executive, and he was in the military, but he was in the Marine Corps specifically. And so again, talking about something like that, even though that may be a skill, that's also a superpower, because that's something that's a differentiator for him compared to every other emergency medicine executive that's out there. And so at the beginning of this call, like how we were talking about my fountain pens and my love of James Bond, that's my differentiator there too, because that's going to make me stick out even more compared to just, your typical marketer. So when it comes to working with my clients, that's typically what I do. Because if you talk to any young child, and you ask them what's their favorite subject in school, everyone has a different answer. And so being honest with that person and just listening to them carefully and hearing what they have to say, it allows me to kind of pick out one or two things that are going to make them stand out.
You mentioned two words earlier that I just like to touch on, especially as we're talking about, social media creation and whatnot. You mentioned the word virality and then the word lurking, right? But yeah. So, I think that's one of the biggest aspects of creating any content, is that we all want to feel that it's obviously leading to somewhere, right? Like you have an outcome that you're going after, but bare minimum, you want to know that people are at least seeing me, and we judge that based on impressions and likes and comments and whatnot. So those people who maybe go on LinkedIn and then they're posting and they're getting nothing out of it, or they're seeing minimal engagement outside of just improving their content and their overall strategy. How do you talk to those people about not being focused on, you get that post that gets 180,000 views, and then after that it goes back down to 40, right? So what would you tell them in terms of being consistent while they're in the process of getting stronger and getting better?
When I post it, is impact over impressions. I am more focused about, whether it's for myself or for my clients, helping them get sales, than as opposed to necessarily going viral. And what happens oftentimes is the viral posts cause a whole bunch of inbound requests that have nothing to do with who their ideal customer or their ideal audience is. So that's kind of how I view the whole virality factor. Now, when it comes, yeah, sure.
What do you mean by that?
So basically,
You can expand on that aspect.
if a post goes viral and it's reaching a whole ton of people on LinkedIn, it's not necessarily going to be directly correlated to your ideal customer, because LinkedIn is the only social media platform where second-degree connections can see when somebody else comments on your feed. And so just to kind of break that down for people who are watching or listening. So for example, Dan and I are first-degree connections. If I comment on Dan's post, then somebody in my network who is not connected to Dan will see me commenting on Dan's post in their feed. And so because of the nature of how posts are spread on LinkedIn, because the other platforms, they don't do this whole second degree thing, sometimes you'll get people that are completely random that will like or comment your post if it goes viral. So that's number one. Yeah. You have a question? Yeah.
Yeah. I actually wanted to push back a little bit on a couple things that you said, only to play a little bit of devil's advocate. And the reason why I want to go there is because there is a sensational amount of snake oil with like marketing agencies, where they could actually be on the other side of that fence and say like, okay, impact. If you're impacting two people, and we do a strategy where you are having 200,000 impressions, I can see a professional being like, well, maybe I should go there. Like that does make a lot of sense. So, only to kind of ground on your point, if someone is like talking to you and they're saying like, hey, I just talked to this other agency and it's like the polar opposite of what you're saying. Why are you right on this?
What sales
And they're wrong on it.
to? What deal? How many clients have you signed? What collaborators have you built that are meaningful?
I haven't started yet. It'll be my first foray. It'll be either you or it'll be them.
The thing that makes it different is, for me, it's about deliberation and just being targeted in your approach, because LinkedIn by nature is more of a, I don't want to say niche, but niching yourself on the platform at first, especially when you're now starting, that's how you're going to grow with intent and grow successfully. So for me, it's about quality. To go back to your point, Mr. Devil's Advocate, it's about quality over quantity when it comes to connections and when it comes to, again, potential business to business collaborators. So that's how I would retort to that. Yeah.
So in one way, it's like there's the machine gun strategy where it's just like we're just trying to hit whatever, kind of what you were mentioning, like you talk to everyone, you're talking to no one, or you're being more of a sniper at first, and you have to extract your story because that's what's going to build those connections through LinkedIn, just because of how that platform is structured.
Yes.
It makes more sense doing it.
And then one
Is that
quick thing
fair
about
to say?
analytics. So the analytics are actually going to be changing a little bit on LinkedIn, where yes, it is impressions, but I think that the most important thing in terms of your post getting the right traction is saves and shares. So that's going to be the next thing, looking at how many saves and how many shares are on your post when you're looking at your analytics. That's number one. And number two, to go back to my main point about if you speak to everyone, you speak to no one. LinkedIn allows you to look at the demographic breakdown of who's looking at your posts. So you can see, is it a senior level executive? Is it someone who's more junior level or more entry level? And then it also allows you to look at the sector. So is it education? Is it healthcare? Is it construction? Just as a random example. And so looking at all of that combined is really going to help dictate in terms of where your content strategy should go. So yeah, just a point there.
That's a fair point, right? It helps to know how the platform's working. So when we're, you're creating that online presence, so, and then we go back to that person who is hanging out in the shadows, never engaging on anything, right? Who the hell was I hearing? Listen, I think Gary Vee was talking about this the other day too. Is we're all looking for those numbers that make us feel good, those engagement metrics. What that aspect though of being intentional for the people who are just sitting there on the computer and scrolling past and never doing a damn thing on your post. What about like how do you actually coach people on being intentional when their numbers look like crap, but they actually might be having a positive effect on people?
The people, are you referring to the lurkers? Just so I'm clear on this, or? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I'm putting content out there. I'm not really getting much traction, and you're telling me, hey man, there's people out there who are not even engaging on your stuff. Still be consistent, still show up. So how do you keep those people motivated and going when maybe they're not seeing their growth?
Yeah,
Kind of gets to a point where they want to be.
Combination of 6 to 12. It takes approximately, I would say, 6 to 12 months to really start gaining momentum on LinkedIn. So again, we go back to what I talked about at the very beginning, starting with the end in mind. So understanding that this is going to be a process and it's going to take time in order to build up the traction that would appeal to you or that you're looking for. So that's number one. Number two is also when it comes to lurking. So if someone is hesitant to start posting, because this is something that I encounter often, people are like, I don't know if I should post, I don't know what to post about, and so on. The easiest way to kind of warm up your LinkedIn presence is to comment, because you could take 10 to 15 minutes a day and just go to people who are When I say meaningful, people who you are thinking about potentially collaborating with. So, for example, I wouldn't necessarily go and comment on a construction worker or a real estate guru's LinkedIn, but I would go on a healthcare executive's LinkedIn and comment on it. Let's say I wasn't posting theoretically. Start with the comments because LinkedIn does reward reciprocity. And so the more you comment, when it's time for you to make that jump and that leap of faith, if you will, to post, then your post is going to gain more traction as well. So commenting is a really great way, especially if you're crunched for time, to at least get started on the platform.
When people are jumping into LinkedIn, I know with with X, Instagram, there's kind of some things that open up to you when you're verified, right? And how's it look like in the world of LinkedIn when you are a regular member to premium to verified? Do you recommend people to like, hey, if we're going to really expand on these strategies here, these are things that you're going to have to do,
So
or maybe not.
if you are
What are your thoughts on that?
using LinkedIn as an arm of marketing for your business, for your company, or for just for your brand, then I think that having at least premium business is definitely essential. Because with premium business, first of all, you have the ability to see who is looking at your profile, which is very important because oftentimes those that are looking at my profile, even if they don't engage, even if they are lurkers, like we were talking about before, I will still go ahead and send them a customized connection request. So that's number one. Number two, it also increases your search and your outreach capability. So if there are specific leads that you want to generate, then having LinkedIn Premium Business at least is a must. Now, the question is, should you have Sales Navigator or not? There are two different opinions of that. Some people like Sales Navigator because you can build lead lists on LinkedIn and you can have a little bit more refined searching. But for me personally, I've used Premium Business only basically my entire LinkedIn career, if you will, and I haven't had any issues with it because I use targeted searching. And then the other thing is regarding verified. I can't tell you that one, Antonio, because I don't know. I haven't been verified. Every time LinkedIn wants to verify, I'm like, no, thank you. So, and so far I haven't had an issue. So,
Yeah. I'd like to maybe switch gears with you real quick because for me, I am a huge I'm a huge film fanatic. I it's like one of my deep passions. I love film, and my godfather, Wayne Wallace, who's been with like Kaiser running shit out there for forever out in Los Angeles. He introduced me uh to James Bond. And so he's like, I was a completely different world. And like, I watched all Roger Moore stuff, Timothy Dalton, like Sean Connery, the list goes on. Um, I played GoldenEye, absolutely murked everybody in my path. So if you want the smoke, yeah. You don't want this. Yeah, you don't want any of this. I'll smoke everybody. Easy. But anyways, why is it important that you landed on not only James Bond, but also why is that public facing, and what do you hope to garner or project with having that versus, let's just say, Jedi Master, or versus like Captain of the Enterprise, or like something that's maybe a different IP. I'd just love to hear some of that, and also what kind of responses you got from having that being more public facing.
I love this. This is the first.
Go no, say it. Go ahead.
The first-
You were gonna say great question, but go ahead. Yeah.
So first of all, when it comes, and this goes back to the idea of branding, your branding should really be an extension of who you are. I have been a James Bond fan for over 20 years. And so because of that, it's always been part of my DNA, if you will. And so my father was a huge influence for me as well in terms of dressing sharp and so on. He was a James Bond fan. I was even a bigger James Bond fan. So that's the first thing. Secondly, though, when it comes to James Bond, my business model is more of a bespoke model where I take on one-on-one clients. I don't do the whole group coaching when it comes to LinkedIn or anything like that, because again, I have people in my network that are fantastic at that, but that's not my market. My market is more the upscale, high-end clinician executive who wants more of that one-on-one attention. And so the whole idea of James Bond as a character is that all the clothes that he wears are bespoke. Everything is done with intentionality. Even his car has specific gadgets that are conducive to whatever environment. Even the clothes that he wears because you've seen all the Bond films. If you look at Bond in the Swiss Alps and he's skiing there, he's going to wear something completely different to if he is in Bolivia or in South America in a warmer climate. And so taking that bespoke, stylish, upscale, elegant approach is the mantras that I apply to my business and when I'm working with my clients. And I will say that based on the client results that I've received so far, the vast majority have been really satisfied, and they say that they feel like I know them at a core. So I ask them, how are your kids doing? How's your spouse doing? I ask them certain much more deeper questions that a normal marketer or somebody else wouldn't be able to ask. And I do think that it's because of my bespoke approach. So that's how the persona of James Bond has become part of my branding, because it's really just an extension of me.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Just to kind of drive that a little bit forward, because I know with some characters, right? If I mean, there's some, there's some entrepreneurs that put like Superman. They're very like forward with Superman, and there's other ones that you choose, very different, very different superheroes and all that. And with Bond, when I think of the branding, like there's a lot of BMW. If you look at the films, it was Rolex originally. Then they moved over to Omega. They signed a deal with Omega, and all these are kind of high end luxury brands. Like these are ones that sponsor like F1 races. They don't sponsor like NBA, stuff at all. So I wonder, like, has there been any feedback on that with that front with you? And then also, if you are working with someone and they're leaning in a direction where you're like, hey, that brand association or that IP association can actually be counterproductive to what
So
you're trying
for
to do.
me, when I get on a call with a client, if they are questioning the price point, as an example, let's kind of just cut straight to the chase. So if they're questioning the price point or anything like that, I tell them straight up. I say, listen, I sell the Rolls Royce. I don't sell the Toyota. Two different markets, two completely different markets. So if that obstacle does
Mm.
come on the call, no problem whatsoever. Because again, I know a few people who charge a lower price point and who do the LinkedIn group coaching. So that offer would be a better fit for them. Now, in terms of, so did that answer your question, right? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
No, it
So
doesn't.
that
No, I'm just kidding. No, it's good. No, it's all good. No, it's all good. Yeah, yeah.
why I love James Bond so much is because it positions me in a very unique market as well. And so that was done very much with intention when I was building out the business. I said, okay, I'm going to be the James Bond on LinkedIn. And people have noticed that. So to answer your question there, people have noticed that because I've had somebody who
Yeah.
is a colleague of mine who we run in a similar circle in terms of healthcare marketing. And he said, you're the best dressed man on LinkedIn. I'm like, great, good. I'm doing my job.
Good. I wanted to I think Dan and I are going to ask you like just a handful of like a rapid fire questions. And one of them is just rapid fire quick like one liners. You don't need to explain anything, but just like to the point. Uh for people in LinkedIn that are trying to get their business to the next level, what is one actionable or
Make sure
tactical
that they're
item that you
headlining
recommend that
the
they do?
outcomes rather than their job title.
So, well, we'll go rapper. So I'll get back to that in a second. What is a good
3 times a week
posting
and in the
frequency?
morning time that I discuss, 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern Standard.
And working with healthcare and doctors, that's one thing that these doctors and these healthcare executives need to get over for them to be a much better leader and a much better business owner.
Talking enough about who they're looking to collaborate with or what value they are providing to other people.
What's the biggest reason people here don't get started with posting content?
One word question. It's just a fear. There's a mindset shift that needs to happen where they feel comfortable. Well, it's not that they feel comfortable. They have to get over that initial fear that people are going to care, what they have to say, or people are going to judge them or anything like that. You have to get over that. And when you're now starting on LinkedIn, your following is small. So that's a great opportunity for you to make those mistakes and fail fast. So that way, when the following gets bigger, then you can be much more dialed in.
What do you wish people knew more about culture?
It is the bedrock for success because attitude is altitude. And so if your culture, whether you're leading a company or whether you are working by yourself, if your culture is one that is of positivity and of collaboration, then you are going to invite those kind of people to follow you, to join you, to network with you, and even clients to work with you. If you have a corrosive culture, then you're basically eating yourself from the inside out like a parasite.
One last thing. What is your prediction of the healthcare industry or the healthcare world? What are your predictions in the next few years of what that's going to look like?
I said it again. So I think that more and more clinicians are going to look at models such as direct payment or direct was it DPC, like direct primary care, and cash pay, and everything is going to become more privatized, because that's really where the clinicians feel like they're going to be able to provide quality care. And I think, again, that's why having a robust LinkedIn presence is so important, because there are a ton of DPC physicians and others that are on the platform that you can find, that you can collaborate with, and even find mentors there.
Love it. Sheikh, last words of wisdom for our audience, dude. What do you want to leave people out with?
Just be happy, enjoy life. Don't be afraid to post on LinkedIn. And my inbox is always open if you ever want to talk.
If someone is seeing this and they do want to connect you, what's the best way for them to connect with you? Harry Potter owls all day long.
LinkedIn,
Yahoo email.
Contact me through direct. Just Sheikh C. Ali. Search for my name on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn is public. My inbox is always open. And thank you again, gentlemen, for the opportunity.